Hello, everyone. Who do we have here? Daniel? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me, mate?
I can. How are you?
All right. Just me and you.
No, it's more. But I haven't. We haven't talked for a while. How are you? Where are you? Are you in Madeira?
No, mate, we're in France at the moment. We're
Ah,
in
okay,
France.
beautiful. You know we
The
are going
German.
to. You know we are going to France, right? We're setting up a company there currently and trying to get the DASP license, which will turn into a MiCA license, etc. So we'll be in France more and more. We'll be in Paris. We'll have an office in Paris soon.
Sounds like it's time to start throwing some meetups, plugging into the Paris Pledge.
Yeah, exactly. Are you like on the permanent there, or will you be traveling next year?
Lots of travel as usual, mate. Try and get to as many of the conferences as we can. We'll be in the UK in January in the southeast, so looking forward to meeting some plebs there. We'll be hitting some meetups
Oh,
in
nice,
the UK.
beautiful. There's a lot to do there, as I've heard. But
You got a lot of background noise, Julian. I can barely hear you.
oh, really? Okay. Mm. Is this the same for everyone else? Should I try to find another spot, maybe? Lina, can you hear me well, or am I?
Still a lot of background. It sounds like you're in a bar having a great time.
I am. That's actually the case.
But we can hear you though.
Let me see if I can find a bit of a quiet place.
Joe, can you test your mic? Make sure we can hear you okay?
Test, 1, 2. I am not in a bar. I wish I was, though.
Where are you, mate, on your travel?
Works well, Joe.
Hello, everyone. How you doing?
Hey, man.
Where am I? I'm in Lisbon. I'm at home for once. It's good to see this panel. What a panel. And Ben's just joined the stage as well.
Hey guys.
Hey, Ben. It's great you found the time. Thank you so much for being part of this. I mean, I would love to hear so much of what you guys are doing. It's very inspirational what people you are meeting, who you're talking to, Samson and you with your company. Would love to hear more. So maybe you want to start with quickly introducing yourself and what you are doing with your company in basically nation state adoption of Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure, I can do. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here, actually. So yeah, Gen 3, one of the main activities of Gen 3 is to interact with nation states and to see if we can help them actually to go into Bitcoin. It's been quite a story because in the beginning, when we started all this, we were mostly contacted by politicians who were in the opposition. And they were probably looking at Bitcoin to see some advantage for themselves, to get elected, to get more votes. But these days, we're seeing more and more active governments actually contacting us. And that is what we've been doing recently. And we can elaborate on that if you want. But that is what we've been doing in Suriname, in Colombia, maybe Argentina, who knows.
Oh, so yeah, can you go a bit more into detail about Colombia? Because like this, for me at least, was not on the radar. There were others that are on the radar. I mean, there was rumors about Mexico because there are a couple of politicians that could be elected soon that are very pro Bitcoin, and then there were some rumors about Paraguay and obviously Argentina, but Colombia, I wasn't aware. Like, how did that come about? Maybe you can give us some more details on how they are thinking about the orange coin.
Yeah, I was not personally involved in visiting Colombia. That was right after Suriname, and I got back home. But most of these contacts, they happen because we have people on the ground everywhere, and they bring us in contact. And Colombia was actually the same. It went pretty fast. And Samson had the opportunity to meet with the president. And then suddenly you notice that there is quite some interest. And yeah, it's the moment. You got to capture the moment. It's not that Colombia is going into Bitcoin probably straight away, but the fact that you can meet them, the fact that you can talk to them, that they are listening, that they are seeing what's happening in the world. Especially El Salvador is being a great example of what can be achieved. And lots of nations are actually looking at that, and they have a lot of questions. So it's still educating, it's still explaining them what can be done, what can be achieved, how Bitcoin can be of benefit to them. But having those opportunities to walk into the office and to talk to those people, yeah, that's pretty amazing and pretty interesting, I think.
That's absolutely the case. I mean, it's like orange pilling, right? There was one guy, then orange pilled another guy, and another guy, and another guy. And so now it seems like this orange pilling network effect has reached the nation state level where, Bukele was one of the first that got orange pilled, and now he's also meeting with other leaders of other nations and orange pilling them. Do you know more details about what they talked about in Qatar? I think there were some rumors and headlines that Qatar is coming in with like billions of dollars. I'm not sure what is true there or not, but certainly interesting.
Yeah, I can't tell you at the moment. I'm actually having a call 2 hours from now to discuss that topic, but I'm not aware of all the details at this point, unfortunately. So I can't say too much about that.
Sure. Hey, Lisa, you joined us on the panel. Thank you so much for being spontaneous. How are you?
Oh, hey guys. Oh, I just flipped on Twitter and saw you were here. It's amazing. I don't feel like we're ever in the same time zone. So good to hear all of your voices. And Ben, I mean, I would love to hear any update that you can provide us on the Qatar news. A good friend of mine and my neighbor is the former ambassador to Qatar, and I've made some introductions in the Bitcoin space for him recently. So if there's any way I can support or help you on that effort, would be, glad to pass along that introduction to you.
Yeah, okay, great. I think we're gonna be talking about that probably in the next days and weeks. But I need more information myself at this point.
From Lisa to Lina, maybe. Lina, you spend a lot of time in El Salvador lately. Are you trying to move there, or like what are your travel plans in the next couple of months? But also, what are your experiences that you have had there? Like you actually met with Bukele, right? You talked to him, probably about Bitcoin as well. Like what is your feeling about El Salvador and how this will evolve and develop?
So yeah, I travel a lot, and I always think this sounds a little well, I always wonder how it comes across, but so I've traveled to a lot of countries, and it happened to me maybe once or twice that I went somewhere and I got the vibes that I got here in El Salvador. And the first time I came, I'm going to elaborate on this in a bit, but the first time I came, I had that impression, and I started talking about it to my friends and the people around me. And they're like, yeah, come on, like, it can't be that great, but you have to actually come and see it to get that, to understand. You come to a country, and for a change, people are not constantly complaining. People are not feeling like their economy is going downhill, like their political system is corrupt, like their environment is just not the way it used to be. Like, oh, it used to be so much better in the past, blah blah. That's like how we, because I'm German, right? So we say that all the time in Germany.
Oh yeah,
So
Swiss and German are like the richest and the richest people, but complaining the most. I feel like nothing is good enough. Oh, it's too hot, and then the sun is gone, and then it's too cold. It doesn't matter. It's always
I mean that is
everything is shit.
Yeah, but that problem you probably have in El Salvador. It's very hot here, but in a great way. It's actually really windy today. Anyway, so but I mean, there's a reason, right? There's a reason why you would look at the EU, you would look at many Western countries and go, hold on, that used to be much better. Like, what's happening? It's sort of a failing and falling empire, very, very unfortunately. So where do you go? You go and look towards the countries that are on the rise. And I have never seen a country like El Salvador that is in such a state of growth and reform and progress. And you see it in the things that the government's doing. You see it in the very progressive leader that they have. You see it in the people. You see it when you're on the street and things are being built, things are being developed. You see it in the startup culture. You see it in just about everything. So I'm actually moving my company here. And to your initial questions, I am also moving myself here. So I think it's
Good on you.
I kind of it was never a conscious decision that I made, but I ended up becoming this person that votes with their feet. So I tended to just go to the countries where I felt welcome, and I've never really felt as welcome as I feel here, just in the sense that it's a country that wants people to come, that wants people to invest, wants people to build, wants people to be part of it, and wants people to contribute. And that it does a lot, and you see it in really just everywhere you go. So when I talk like that, then people go, oh, you're so biased because you're a Bitcoiner and they have a Bitcoin president, but that's really not it. So I would invite people here and they would come and they'd say, hey, actually you were right. So a lot of people come here and either they kind of end up staying like me, or they come here and they go back and say, hey, I want to buy something, or I want to invest, or so there's a lot, and Bitcoin's a big part of it, because Bitcoin brought a lot of investment, brought a lot of interest, contributed a lot to putting El Salvador on the map for many people. But just in general, you see that there's a reform happening, and they call it a rebirth, I think. But you could call it whatever you want. You can see the changes.
Sounds like a very entrepreneurial and very positive looking
Yeah, I
nation
mean, the
that really
province
wants
of
to
the
make
CEO
it in
of
the
El
future.
Salvador, right?
Yeah, they want to build the
Yeah.
future that they like their kids to see their kids grow up, etc. And Bitcoin is one part of it. So, do you really feel like when you're on a daily basis, kind of interacting with people, or like walking on the street or working, etc., do you feel that okay, this is the Bitcoin nation, or is it still just very early?
In all honesty, the day-to-day adoption of Bitcoin is not it's not that you go everywhere and everybody's just spending Bitcoin all the time. But I said this many times, it's not something that you would expect. I don't think anybody here realistically expected that, and putting that expectation on the country is kind of not fair, in my opinion, because you went through basically the country adopted Bitcoin and then we went into a bear market. So if you look on the global scale and you on a global level, in a bear market, people kind of lose interest and they get skeptical and so on and so forth. But what you have here is the infrastructure was being set, and now that interest is coming back, El Salvador is going to be the country with some of the easiest access to Bitcoin, and that is going to put it so far ahead. And then at the same time, during this entire period, these entire last couple years, you had startups here, you had grassroots movements here, you have Bitcoin Beach who are doing crazy things. You have Me Premier Bitcoin who are putting Bitcoin education into the school curriculums. You have Kubo Plus, and you have all these things that are happening that are low time preference developments that are going to pay off big time in the coming years or so. So while on the street, personally, my personal experience, I'm not seeing people just walking around with their Lightning wallets and all that. And I do encounter situations where I'm like, can I pay with Bitcoin? And people are like, nah. But I think that is a matter of time, and that is perfectly fine for me.
Daniel, you've traveled a lot as well. You are traveling a lot. You've been to El Salvador probably as well, and other countries. What are experiences that you wanted to share on these very first steps that some nations are doing, and looking at a probably 100-year development, or maybe in a decades. This will take decades, obviously, but. What are some experiences you wanted to share, and maybe how do you see it all play out? What do you think maybe the next countries, some of the next interesting countries could be adopting Bitcoin now?
Were you still talking to me, or were you talking to someone else? Sorry.
Daniel, I was trying to reach
Daniel.
Okay.
Sorry,
I'm kicking that to Joe, because there's nowhere in the world I'm playing this card above Joe. Joe's done more fucking traveling than anybody right now on this panel. So over to you, Joe.
Oh, okay. I see how it is. Thanks, Daniel.
I'm kidding. I actually, I've got some bad news to share. I wanted to visit the highest number of sort of Bitcoin countries around the world and beat Paco, who I'm sure you know, at Run with Bitcoin. And he got to 21 countries recently. And I went to what I thought was going to be country 22, which was Morocco. And I spent 36 hours bouncing around Morocco trying to use Bitcoin, and I failed. So I'm still stuck on 21 countries in 2023. But I mean, that is also quite nice in a way that it is 2021. Yeah, I'm sorry, Lisa. I've let the whole team down. Bitcoiners around the world must be disappointed. But yeah, to answer the question a bit more seriously, yeah, we're still mega early, right? I know we say this all the time, but very few people understand what Bitcoin is. I mean, I have an example just today. I bought a new desk for like my workspace at home, and I actually bought it through my partner. So she was doing the negotiation. It was on Facebook Marketplace, and the guy said, I said to Sophie, you know, could you ask if they'll accept Bitcoin? And the guy was like, yeah, all right. What is Bitcoin? How does it work? And I was like, that's cool. That's the first time I've had that reaction for quite a long time. And he came over. I bought the desk off him. I showed him how to receive Bitcoin, and we had like a half an hour chat about it. And his approach to it was was like avoiding taxes and avoiding sort of declaring money, which, you know, to each their own. That's absolutely fine. There's a lot of people that want to use Bitcoin for that. I don't want to necessarily advocate for that in a public setting because that would be very foolish of me. But he was, you know, really trying to understand how he could not sort of reveal his earnings to people. And but it just, you know, Bitcoin has been around for 15 years, and this guy was asking really sort of basic questions about Bitcoin. It's the first time he'd ever touched Bitcoin, and all it took was someone to message him on Facebook Marketplace saying, "Yeah, here's I'll accept Bitcoin I'll pay in Bitcoin, sorry, if you'll accept it," and he did. And that's in this is Portugal, which is a relatively developed country. So there's 190 something countries in the world. One of them has it as legal tender right now. Well, technically two if you include the Central African Republic, but that's kind of fizzled out. So there's a long, long way to go, and there's a lot of people that might have some awareness of Bitcoin and might have heard the word Bitcoin, but they certainly don't know what it means or what it could mean for their nation states. So I think also to answer the question of this panel today, this Twitter Spaces rather, is it good or bad for Bitcoin adoption? I think everything is sort of good for Bitcoin adoption, isn't it? And I don't like the idea of the stick as opposed to the carrot when it comes to Bitcoin adoption, but it certainly is useful. And El Salvador's progress and the things that Lina highlights there are really, really persuasive to any other small country or small island developing state that is looking to experiment with Bitcoin. Is that enough of a ramble to answer some of the questions?
I can build on it. I can build on it.
Wicked.
I can build on it. And then I'll kick it across to Giacomo because this is a perfect segue for him. And to build on what you're saying about the education piece, and that's what we saw when we were working closely with Andre and the president of Madeira, when he was taken across to Miami to go and meet Samson and Michael Saylor and Max Kaiser and those people, just to get a feel for, you know, what is this thing? What is Bitcoin? Who are all these crazies? And I remember vividly a conversation that he had with Saylor, and Saylor spent 45 minutes explaining to him the importance of getting the citizenship up to speed. You have to focus on the education. Don't come out and just say, yay, fireworks, we're all accepting Bitcoin. That's not going to work. That is not going to, you know, push the needle in the right direction. You've got to get something on the ground set up so the citizens there can get comfortable with the idea first and then get comfortable with the tools. But that's where the plebs come in. And that's why Free Madeira was set up, the Forum Regional Economic Education, for economic education, which is, backed by the government. Sorry to all the libertarian friends out there, but that's just the way it is, because he took the advice, he took that on board. He asked Andre to then start this economic forum with a real focus on getting the education into the merchants. But it doesn't happen quickly, right? It happens very, very slowly. But sure enough, they're coming. The merchants are coming. There's one brewery on that island, and that brewery is now going to start accepting Bitcoin in their flagship store. They're going to be one of the main sponsors for the conference in Madeira in the beginning of March. The golf course is going to start accepting Bitcoin. They're going to run a Bitcoin golf tournament 2 days before the conference starts. You know, these things they're slowly picking up. But and this is why I wanted to kick it onto Giacomo, because of the work he's going to be doing with Plan B and going around the world and trying to kickstart this education. So Giacomo, are you there?
Giacomo, when Italy?
I'm in Zonte, actually. I'm here in Zonte. So let me start with my comment on education in general, which also piggybacks with what Lina was saying about expectations. I'm here in El Salvador for the third time in my life. And what I noticed is that the first time around, it was the year, so it was 2021. It was the year of over expectation and the year of overhype. We had the announcement of the Bitcoin city that everybody was thinking it would have been built the next week. We had the all-time high price at 69K, and we had the Taproot activation party, and everybody, including me, was expecting all the possible wallets to adopt TapScript and key aggregation on the next day. So the first year was crazy, was over expectation, over hype. People were happy to install Chivo to receive this dollar credit, and everybody was euphoric. The second year that I was here was the year of overcorrection of expectation. So many merchants were taking out the Chivo POS for the first time after 1 year, because after November 2021, nobody was asking for Bitcoin anymore. And so they were, oh, okay, like this thing that I was not using for 1 year. Chivo sucked really hard. It still sucks a bit, but way, way less than it used to suck before. It was terrible. Most transaction failed. Default in supermarket was not Lightning Network, so there was people waiting for 40 minutes in the supermarket to wait for on-chain confirmation. It was crazy. And the price was very, very low. It was on a few days, it was basically around 16K, and there was no Bitcoin city in sight, and nobody was using Taproot. And so it was a moment of overcorrection of expectation. Everybody was kind of boomed out, and people started to say, oh, I'm going to a Zonte, but only 20 shops accept Bitcoin and not 30, which was, if you think about that, is crazy, because it's true that if you were expecting something unrealistic, reality is less than that. But if you were expecting something realistic, there is no other place in the world where you could come and pay your car and house and most of the shopping Bitcoin. I mean, it's still low adoption in general, but it's the highest concentration of adoption probably in the world right now still. So it was overcompensation. And on the third year, which is right now, I finally see some reasonable, realistic middle ground. It's just like the price. Like we are at 40,000, 45,000. This is like a recovering of the right pricing of future expectation without our realistic timings. And where does education fit into this? Education fit into this because the process of education is exactly the fact that somebody that went through some kind of experience before, they can pass over the experience without new people having to remake the same mistake. So Bitcoin cycles, for example, price cycles, hype cycles, we have been through those several times. This is not my first cycle. I knew that the price was going to do something like this. I mean, it always does. And I knew that technological expectation were something like this. Adoption, it goes in waves, ups and downs. So I knew that. And what I failed to do was to teach people during the first year to not be overexcited, to teach people during the second year to not be over-depressed. And I think that what we have to do is exactly, so education is nothing else but just passing over a previous experience that you got by making mistake to reduce the number of mistakes that other people has to do. So it's very important not just to promote Bitcoin when we do education, but it's also important to explain the shortcomings, to explain the challenges, to explain where the people will be disappointed. A very important part of education is not to overhype, but is actually manage expectations. So to a degree, we failed. I think, well, not everybody. Maybe somebody was very, very good at that. I was not good at that. I was not good at managing expectation in 2021 about El Salvador. So that created some overcorrection. So good education is also managing expectation realistically and correctly with the right timing, which is never overnight and is always in a process. So this is exactly what I'm trying to do now. We will do some courses for merchants, also explaining why Chivo sucks and why Lightning Network itself sucks a little bit. It's still the only option, but that we have, because we cannot scale blockchains. But we have to explain why blockchains suck, because they do. We have to explain why Lightning Network sucks less than blockchains, but still sucks. So everything sucks, and we have to be honest about that. We don't have to overhype. So speaking about more like the topic of this call, of this space, which is nation state adoption, we will also do nation state education. For example, we are starting a course with so-called public servants in El Salvador. We are doing something similar with the government of Georgia, and we're doing something similar with the city of Lugano in Switzerland, and maybe we will join effort with the government of Madeira, because it's also important to give the instruments for a well-meaning political administration not to screw up with Bitcoin. So it's important to manage expectation for them as well. It's important to give the right tools to understand what they are dealing with. That said, it's true that it's a little bit ironic for anarcho-capitalists to have to deal with nation states. We have several ways to rationalize this to ourselves. So, for example, my way to rationalize this necessity to myself is very much in agreement with what Eric Voskuil was writing in Bitcoin, when he says that Bitcoin is a fight against the state. So the states want to inflate money and to censor monetary transactions, and the market wants to resist that. But when people say, yeah, but in this case, there is this state that will actually endorse Bitcoin, Eric usually answers, yeah, but in that case, that state is basically filling the role of the market in that case. So when there are sanctions against North Korea is the black market. And the state in that case is somebody who is blocking North Korea. So even if states are in general criminal organizations that are based on physical extortion of money, and that's a general thing that I don't think I can exempt any modern nation state from that. Maybe the Principality of Liechtenstein is based on private property mostly, but there are very, very few cases where a modern nation state is not a literal criminal organization. But still, criminal organization, when they interact among each other, sometimes they also steal from each other. And if we have a defensive instrument like Bitcoin that can protect people from stealing through inflation, or stealing through confiscation, or stealing through censorship, then we can teach even some organizations that are less bad than others to use Bitcoin to protect themselves from others. Of course, there is not just this dynamic. There is a dynamic of, for example, we have states that can use Bitcoin for avoiding international sanctions or to avoid exported inflation. El Salvador is a case of both, because, for example, a company here in El Salvador cannot get a SWIFT number. They have to use a correspondent bank in the US. So basically, they have to depend on US banks. They have to ask permission to US banks to transact. And they are forbidden from interacting directly with the global banking system. This is a case of partial censorship, or anyway, a case of violent monopoly. They are also importing inflation from the US. So the Fed is printing money. They're using the printed money to bail out the friends of the printing press, and El Salvador is very far from the printing press. So they receive the inflation, but they don't receive the bailouts directly. So they are being inflated mostly passively without any benefit. So some states are victims of the fiat game, not just perpetrators. And when a state is a victim of the fiat game, you can have a particular nation state in love with Bitcoin, at least for a certain time. And I think that's, I mean, if we assume that that's the goal, then we fall into a paradox, because if the goal of Bitcoin was to be adopted by nation states, the entire design of Bitcoin is wrong and it doesn't make sense. But if being adopted by some nation state is not the goal, but it's just a symptom of its success, This is something that we probably have to accept, and there's nothing wrong with that. It can also give some benefit in the short term. So I would say, like, my point would be that Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy are not a cause of Bitcoin success. They are a symptom of Bitcoin success. If Bitcoin succeeds, there is no way that public companies will not adopt it for treasuries. And Bukele and El Salvador are also not a cause of Bitcoin success, but a symptom as well. If Bitcoin works, then nations that have everything to gain from escaping from the fiat game, they will adopt it because it's better for them. So I will frame it in this way. We don't have to trust government. Bitcoin doesn't have to trust government to work. It will not make any sense. But we have to accept that if Bitcoin works, some people that use it will also be governments directly to escape inflation and confiscation and censorship, or even indirectly because anything specific in a country which is new, which is novel, which is somehow attractive can, for example, attract business and tourism. So there is also the indirect advantage of just becoming a Bitcoin country, which is cool. I mean, I see nothing wrong with that. I mean, Dubai is a nation state. Emirates are nation states. They are not so much libertarian in some regards. They are more libertarian than the US in other regards, but not in all. And still, they made money out of giving freedom to people. So Dubai is a place where you can go and do business and nobody will bother you because you are doing business. That's a space of freedom that will attract money, will attract capital, will attract business, and so everybody will be richer as a consequence. So this is a good game theory. It's not bad. We should not fight against it. We just have to be aware that in general, we don't have to fall in the other extreme of begging governments to give permission to use Bitcoin, because that's the exact point that Bitcoin was created to avoid.
That's super interesting. So do you think, like, in the long, you were speaking about game theory here, so let's take a very long shot range, like 50 years or even 100 years, because now it did start, right? The first nations like El Salvador, etc., are adopting it. First companies are adopting it, like MicroStrategy, and obviously a lot of normal people and a lot of plebs are adopting it. So long term, do you see even a future where there could be nation states that do not adopt Bitcoin? Or like in 100 years, how will it look like? Will it still be a couple of small countries only? Will it be like half of the countries? Or will it be literally every nation state? Because otherwise they would lose out if they would just build their house of cards on their own nation fiat currency.
Well, I know that most of the people here will probably think I'm crazy for this prediction, but I think that if Bitcoin succeed, we will probably not see many modern style nation states in 100 years. Modern nation states are a pretty recent development. They mostly started to develop after Philip IV in France in the 14th century, and then they really exploded, especially after the French Revolution. And the ultimate model of fiat state is in the last sense, so the model that created in the communist states, the Nazi state, the current United States of America, is a very recent phenomenon that is very, very connected with money and the fiat money. So without fiat money, you cannot have current federal spending of the US. You cannot have US military without fiat money. It's impossible. So the federal spending of the United States of America is impossible without dominant fiat money scheme. That's why they adopted it gradually after World War I. There was the first central bank, and then there was a confiscation of gold in the 30s, and then there was Bretton Woods, and then there was Nixon with the breaking of the peg, and now there is like the printing, and there is a petrodollar agreement with the oil country. Everything is a fiat scheme. If you break that as a minimum, you go back to the nation states that we had in the beginning of the 20th century. But you have to understand it's a very different kind. So people living in 1901, they didn't need passports to go around. So it's not like, okay, there is a new freedom visa. No, they didn't need any passport to go around before World War I in most of the world. There was no concept. That passport was like a technical concept for merchants and big ships. It was not something for individual people. They had no there was no concept of taxes on your earnings of basically income tax. There was no income tax. So the kind of nation states you had back then was way different. Global taxation, even in the worst places, was never above 12, 13% in the beginning of 20th century. So yeah, maybe there could be something close to the nations. I think that if Bitcoin works in 50 years or in 100 years, maybe we have something like the beginning of 20th century nation state, which is still way better than now, in my opinion. But if Bitcoin breaks the feedback loop that created the growth of modern nation states over the last centuries and maybe reverse that trend, we could go probably back to some kind of feudalism, which of course for many people is like a dystopian argument, but I'm a big fan of feudalism, so I think it will be cool.
Knut, thank you for joining us. How are you? And what do you think will nation states and corporations and normal people, what do they contribute to the Bitcoin adoption? Like, which of these, or which do we even need all these institutions to adopt? Will it be only a grassroots movement from the plebs basically, or how do you see this play out on which level, like nation states, corporations, small businesses, high net worth individuals, and like normal people on the street? Which level is most important for Bitcoin adoption?
Well, hi, nice to be here. Yeah, I agree with Giacomo on most of the points he raised. I would touch on some of the stuff he said, like how to rationalize being an anarcho-capitalist and still working with politicians, as is the case with our work with the Free Madeira organization. And the way I see it is that we can either have a smooth transition or a violent one from this old world to the new one. And we obviously prefer a smoother transition to a more violent one. So therefore, it's important to orange pill politicians, because they're, at the end of the day, they're just people. They just happen to be in positions of power and in a system that is rigged. So I think we can, by educating them and getting them on board, we can have a smoother transition away from the paradigm of the modern nation state, if you so will. So I think the benefit lies in orange pilling individuals, regardless of their politicians or bums or billionaires. Obviously, the more influential they are on decision making in society, the more impact it will have. But yeah, I think Bitcoin is a binary bet. If it works, we're going towards hyper-Bitcoinization, and we're in the early stages of that. And if it doesn't work, well, we're fucked, basically. We in this group, we still know each other, and the real yield is the friends you make along the way, as Farrington puts it. And with Bitcoin, what I've realized is that there's a deeper truth in that, because Bitcoin is nothing without the people in it. We are literally the Bitcoins because they're in our heads. It's all about keeping a secret at the end of the day. And a computer is just a fancy calculator who helps us do the work to verify and not trust. But that's all it is. It's really just an extension of our brain. It is to human beings. An ASIC is to a human being what a stick is to a chimpanzee or a bonobo that is trying to extract more ants per time unit from the ant hill or the termite mound. So in my mind, as long as it works, it is unstoppable and it is inevitable. And as Giacomo says, these nation states adopting Bitcoin and everything, it's a symptom of Bitcoin working rather than something we need for Bitcoin to work, because the Bitcoins are literally the people in it. Now, where was I going with this?
You were shilling ant miners by the sound of things.
Yeah, or termite miners. Well, yeah. Let me catch my thought here, because I had one.
Maybe I can say this is going really deep. Like I will not be able to sleep tonight because I will think all these things through and like progress on these lines of thinking to this. So it's really, really deep.
Yeah.
But you're right.
If we compare this to Blockbuster Video or Fujifilm or Kodak or anything like that, or even the whole horse industry before the car was introduced, that happened in a all of those shifts happen in a very short amount of time. That gradually, then suddenly thing. Now, of course, nation states and central banks and big institutions are they're much more powerful than Blockbuster Video ever was. So we're collapsing a much bigger industry, the international industry of organized crime, basically, that is leeching value off of everyone's efforts. So they're probably going to be more resistant than Blockbuster Video was. So they're not just going to fill the central bank with candy aisles as a last measure of trying to survive, being obsoleted by something better. But they're going to do something similar, which is probably just more draconian stuff. And with the thing to do is, as a citizen in a democracy, is to resist and refuse to obey, and not do what they tell you to do, because it's the people who do what they're told that enable this whole totalitarianist tendency to keep on growing. So we need to remember that there is only one human right, and it's the right to be left alone. And if we're not left alone, someone somewhere is violating that right, and we need to resist that. That's the ethical thing to do, and that's why this thing was invented in the first place, and then subsequently discovered by so many other freedom-loving and thinking and daring people. So yeah, enjoy your front row seat to the future, and be vigilant.
It's definitely.
Can I just add on, Julian, just something that Giacomo got me thinking about like nation states and how they look completely different to how they ever used to. And Europe being a perfect example is one super nation state now, with the European Central Bank as its leader, and Christine Lagarde at the flick of a pen can change hundreds of millions of people's lives. And look what's happening here in this zone. We've got all of these regulations being pushed down on us. We have MiCA, as you guys are only too aware of. You have to, if you want to carry on your business, and to Knut's point, we should stop complying. But if you're running a business, there's no chance that you can. And if you are providing an on-ramp, it's very, very difficult. But now we have this proof of work mining ban that is trying to get pushed through the European Parliament. And if that gets pushed through, then all cards are off the table. That's just a complete and utter total nightmare. So they go ahead.
Yeah, just to they can make life hard for us, but as long as we still can provide goods and services and receive Bitcoin for them, a company is nothing but a Telegram group and a couple of people shooting sats to one another. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. We don't need fiat companies. We don't need to make fiat anymore. We don't need to make money in fiat terms. We need to make more and more people accept this for their goods and services. And that's how we get out of the trap. That's how we take the money out of the old system, and how we make people use the new money instead. So it's a double whammy. We reduce the power of the old powers that be, and we increase our power. And as number goes up, as we do this, we gain more political lobbying power, if you will. We gain more influence. Bitcoiners, every time Bitcoin 10x's, Bitcoin favorable policies are 10 times more likely to happen, because we gain that influence by just becoming wealthier. So the way to do it is just opt out by opting in.
I love it. And it's just clicked for me why Giacomo is a big fan of feudalism, because he's set up to become an overlord. That's perfect. Over to you, Giacomo.
No,
It's gonna
because
dub his children.
this is cipher feudalism, where the lord can just pretend that he lost all the nobility in a tragic boating accident. So it's even better. Normal feudalism, people, the plebs know that you are the lord, and so they can come after you when you screw up. But cipher feudalism is when you can hide your lordship inside a boating accident. It's even cooler.
Oh my God, how did we get here? But I love it. I love it. Great conversation. So one
So
last question.
on the feudalism note, if I may, this is like I've had so many interesting conversations with Alex Svetsky about this, and this is like there's a lot of talk about how Bitcoin banks the unbanked, and it's for the poor people of the world, and that is all good. But there's one effect of this that we're missing out on here, and that is that excellent people in the world who are good at managing their capital and good at being entrepreneurs and coming up with new ideas and thereby providing value to all of humanity will be able to form dynasties. So we'll see a new form of aristocracy start blossoming again, and we'll get this, what they had back in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, with all these great thinkers and composers and philosophers and scientists and whatnot. They didn't come from nowhere. They came from people accumulating wealth over generations and thereby promoting excellence. Of course, it's always mixed with violence. So some of the people that are promoting themselves as excellent today are really the opposite, because they acquired their wealth by theft and coercion. But in a world where you cannot do that, you'll just propel real excellence, and thereby people who are better at providing goods and services to other people get rewarded for doing so instead of punished, and you get into a better world.
I think the important thing to remember, on that note, is that Bitcoin actually levels the playing field so that those people of excellence around the world have equal chance. What we've seen in the last couple centuries was really dependent on where you were born, with whether you would have a chance to actually use the giftings that you have. And so I think with Bitcoin, we will see for the first time people from around the world be able to rise up. And that's why I'm so passionate about circular Bitcoin economies, because I really do think there's a practical impact at the sequence of who adopts Bitcoin. If we have Bitcoin only adopted by countries and people from the countries where wealth already exists, a lot of the inequalities that we already see will be continued. And so I think it's very crucial that we see Bitcoin made usable for people at the lowest rungs of the economy, those who really need it right now, so that 50 years from now, we'll see the current power and wealth more equally dispersed around the world, so that those with the abilities can rise up. And obviously that brings benefits to everybody around the world. But that's why I think that Bitcoin nation adoption, while it's not necessary for the long term of Bitcoin, it is important to see countries like El Salvador, because it's the fact that they've adopted Bitcoin is going to reshape their place in the pecking order 50 years from now, versus if they had waited to be one of the last. And so I really do think this is going to be an equalizing event.
Yeah, if I may reply to that, because this is sort of the point I'm getting at. We're told as if you're somewhere on the right wing political spectrum, there's this narrative that equality of opportunity is the thing to strive for instead of equality of outcome, which is what the left wingers promote all the time, which is impossible. But if you think that through one step further, equality of opportunity is just as evil, because that means that you have to level the playing field for every generation. And the state has to take everything from the parents so that their child is not, does not have an advantage over all the other kids when they grow up. And that's why we go to the same schools and we get molded into this, Pink Floydian meat grinder that is public schooling. So I think what you're saying is true for the first generation of Bitcoiners, but going into the future, people will have very different opportunities because some of us will take more care of our children and our children's future, and will have a greater ability to do that. And the thing to remember here is that that is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a very, very good thing. But like with everything else, like Bitcoin makes you rethink everything. And this is the latest rabbit hole it has made me rethink. That is this notion of equality of opportunity. Because if you think about what equality is, at its core, it's just the opposite of quality. So you can either have equality or quality. And I think I prefer quality.
A very, very extreme but reasonable rabbit hole to get into. I think that the idea of equality of opportunity is a first step in the right direction out of the dystopian idea of equality of outcome, which is a straight, just straight out Soviet hell. But I agree that even in the equality of opportunity meme, there are some flaws. For example, even if you don't consider intergenerational wealth, which is a very, very important element in society, even just like looks, like it's clear that I look so much better than Knut. I am so much handsome than him. So my opportunities, even where I go around and talk with people, are different. Still, what is important is that we have some equality of rights, so that the same criteria of right distribution, property right distribution, the same criteria of you come first, you get that resource, or you work on the resource is yours, or you transmit the resource with a voluntary contract. Now the resource has been transmitted, and this is basically something that can be almost equally defended. It will never be really equally defended, because people with more resources will always be more able to defend their right to be left alone. But Bitcoin is an equalizer in the same way that the people in the Old West used to say that the cult is a great equalizer, because with the cult, even a woman which is physically weaker than, sorry, I'm not supposed to say that anymore, but even a XX chromosome carrier person, which is differently strong than a XY chromosome bearer, with a cult in her hand, in their hand, she could or they could just kill as well and defend themselves as well. So you see that the cult is an equalizer, not in the sense that everybody will literally have the same opportunity, but you make defending your right to be left alone more accessible to everybody. And when you have the right to, when you can enforce the right to be left alone, then you can compete on other things that are not brute violence. And when we compete on brute violence, we have negative sum games where we destroy wealth. When we compete on other things that are not violence, we have positive sum games that create wealth. So it's not the same, it's not symmetrical. People competing about robbing each other, they destroy wealth. It's a negative sum game. People competing about about becoming richer or better looking or whatever, or more creative or more happy, they are not destroying wealth, they are creating wealth for everybody else as a positive externality. So the real point of equalization is distributing the tools to defend your rights, your right to be left alone. And Bitcoin is such a tool, just like a cult was in the old Wild West.
How dare you, Giacomo? And if I may just add some points to your already so eloquent words, the praxeological terms for this are biological and catalactic competition. And biological competition is fang and claw. Catalactic competition is unhindered free market, where every transaction is consensual, and thereby everyone wins. So that is always what we should strive for. And as you say, the right to be left alone, that's the equalization. We're equal to the law, to natural law. That's the equality to strive for, not the equality of opportunity, not the equality of outcome, equality of the right to be left alone, basically.
You see, Knut, looks are not the only thing that matters. You're better than me, at least the terminology.
Giacomo, I will quote you on this. You think you look better than Knut.
No, I'm joking. I'm probably among the worst looking people in this chat, which include also all the male participants.
No. Giacomo is one of the most beautiful human beings on earth. He's Italian almost, for fuck's sake.
Exactly, except for tax purposes.
Oh my god, you guys are so fun. I'm looking forward to see you all again and hopefully do this in person in Madeira very soon. Knut, you'll definitely be there. Daniel, you'll be there. And I'm sure all of you guys will be there. Thank you so much for taking the time. This hour is already over. It was so much fun. It was so great to talk to you. I would maybe like to open up for one question from the audience. Not sure if we can do that, Arson, or whoever is behind the Relai host account. It would be great if we could have one question at least.
Yeah, let's do it. Whoever wants to ask a question, just send me an invite, request to speak, and I'll do it. Or I can pick a question from the comment section too.
No questions? Well, even better. Is there something in the comments?
What's the maximum airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
African or European?
I don't know that.
Nick Baker has a question. That's how I understood it. Nick, you can speak up. Do you have a question?
Just to sum up the background of my question really quick. Obviously, when Bitcoin was first created in like 2009, you had like the early, programmers and stuff like that playing around with it. Then you had like the early adopters, then like plebs, then small businesses like mom and pops and stuff like this. Then you had like, MicroStrategy, and then small governments. Great. So my question is when ETFs and institutions come on, obviously nation states like Russia, China, stuff like this, they want something very liquid, and Bitcoin, underneath the trillions, not that liquid for them to exchange large amounts of cash, regardless of it skyrocketing up the price of Bitcoin in USD terms. But how close do you think when the ETFs come? Because I know when ETFs were approved with gold, it was like a 3-4 year like bull, quote unquote. run for gold that nation states will adopt. So I'm assuming like there can't be too many bull runs, right? Because gold hasn't done any bull run since the ETF. It fluctuates a couple thousand here and there, but not like anything major. So I'm assuming when nation states finally adopt it, if they ever do, it's going to stabilize the price, quote unquote, because, Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, for, to buy stuff. So my question is, how long do you think it would take from ETF approval to nation state adoption, if that ever happens?
Well, first, I think your thesis is wrong. I don't think Bitcoin ever stabilizes at some fixed amount of fiat currency. If it goes all according to plan, it's going to keep on eating all the wealth of all the other fiat currencies. And that process is not going away just because nation states adopt it and allocate a certain percentage to it.
Yeah, no, just real quick, I understand it will never like stabilize, but you're not going to have these like atmospheric, like 20.
I'm not so sure. I think this is a gradually then suddenly thing, and I don't think we're near the suddenly yet. See it like this: 93% approximately of all the bitcoins that would ever exist have already been mined. Over the next 12 years, we will mine the next 6%. So this whole scenario from $1 to $40,000 can play out once again by when these next 6% get distributed. So we can have the same or even higher orders of magnitude, like number of percent gain over the next 12 years as we've had the first 12 years.
Yeah, that's true. And thank you. Just my core question is so I said that nation states won't, I think that's my hypothesis, won't adopt Bitcoin because there's not enough liquidity, right? Like US, China doesn't want to play with an asset or anything that's only 700 billion market cap. So how soon do you think, probability wise, that once an ETF gets approved and some $1 trillion gets added into the liquidity pool, that nation states will start to adopting, which I think will be anyway. So what do you think?
Okay,
how are you finding liquidity? I think this is where you're getting probably stuck.
So liquidity is all of the monetary value and all the fiat currency that has been added and in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin, 21 million every 10 minutes. From the beginning, 50 Bitcoin gets released, then 25, half. That's fine. When you have one Bitcoin, you have one Bitcoin. But I'm talking about like all of the fiat in any denomination is what, like 800 billion or something. And if let's say today, US says, hey, our country is going to adopt Bitcoin. Like what? No, like how do you even do that with such a small liquidity pool? Like, yeah, they'll dump all of it like USD. Like let's say they went El Salvador's route. You can't hypothetically, I don't think, do that until you have more liquidity. And that's what I'm talking about. All the fiat combined that purchase Bitcoin.
Okay. I'd like to flip the question for a second here before giving a more level-headed answer. And that is, how does a nation state own Bitcoin? What is a nation state? What is a corporation? Who owns MicroStrategy's Bitcoins and who possesses them? Because there's a difference between ownership and possession. So you can own something by contract, which is what I believe MicroStrategy is doing, and I think it's NYDIG that holds their Bitcoin or something. I don't know what the custodian is, but the point is that there's a custodian, and the custodian is some guy holding a secret, keeping a secret from someone, and that some guy can always bail. Well, there can be multi-sig solutions and such, But it's going to be very interesting to see how this whole thing plays out when nation states and central banks, who think they are real things, but they're just people with a collective imagination thing going on. When they actually try to hold something that resides within people's heads at the end of the day. And some guy can always fuck off and do something else, and then all the Bitcoins are gone. So I don't really see how this plays out. I don't know, maybe someone else is better at answering this question, but I think this is baked into the question. How does a corporation and how does a nation state actually possess Bitcoin, or how do they keep this secret?
Yeah, I'll hop in. Just on the corporate side, I mean, very few people are aware that. So I work at Custodia. This is not a shill for Custodia. And I should say we're not FDIC insured. We don't have our products available in every state. We're live in about 28 states. But the Wyoming Speedy Charter that was written, Caitlin participated, Adam Swick participated, Kraken participated in drafting the statutes. Those statutes actually protect Bitcoin in custody, and that Bitcoin in custody is held in a bailment agreement. And what bailment really simply explained, if you think about when you valet park your car, there's been no transfer of ownership of the car when you give it to the valet to custody it for you. And under the Speedy Charter that is the Wyoming Bank Charter that Custodia has, we hold Bitcoin in custody for clients in a bailment arrangement. And to your point, Knut, if you hold it at another institution that does not have that protective arrangement for their customers, you are right. They are only protected by essentially what is a user agreement. They're not protected by law or by statute. So just
so this is sort of what I'm getting at. It's like not your keys, not your car to be parked by the valet person. So when the valet takes the car to park it for you, he does not own the car, but the car he possesses the car. So he could theoretically just take the car and drive away. And it's the same thing with the Bitcoins. It's just that with Bitcoins, the incentives are very different from anything else. And if a nation state, for instance, gives a custodian the right to custody the Bitcoin for the state, but then starts to threaten this custodian with violence and say that you need to pay 80% taxes or something, then the custodian has all the incentives in the world to just take the coins and fuck off. So this is, I think we're redrawing the political map here on a much larger scale than people imagine in the paradigm we're living in right now. Oh, I dropped my mic.
Thanks, Knut. I think Julian has already left, so he wanted to tell everybody thank you for participating. Let's do this again in a few months. I think it's a good time to wrap up. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. And this will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you wanna give it a listen there, do it. It will be in 1 week. And have a great evening, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
See you guys.